to miss. We had to miss it. So I'm excited to introduce to you guys our speakers for today. So first, I'll start with Lindsey. Lindsey is a shareholder at Smith, Mills, and Schrock. She is currently serving as vice president on the firm's board of directors and is a member of the firm's workers' compensation and employment law practice groups. For over 15 years, she's been representing employers in the defense of workers' compensation cases, employment matters, and civil litigation in Iowa, Nebraska, and Missouri. Lindsey is a council member of the workers' compensation section of the Iowa State Bar Association, a member of Blackstone Inn of Court, and a member of the American Bar Association's Tort Trial and Insurance Practice section, currently serving as vice chair. By the way, everyone, their bios they're so wonderful. I always have to cut them down and I always feel so bad. Lindsey has been a guest lecturer in a number of seminars. She also frequently seminars to clients on issues involving workers' compensation and employment law. So hi, Lindsey, how are you? Oh, is she frozen? Hello.
Oh, I'm here.
Hi. And so our next speaker is Dr. Claire Muselman. I'm sure you all know her. She is the vice president of the Workers' Compensation Center of Excellence at North American Risk Services. She's bringing passion-filled purpose and energy with a dose of glitter and sparkles to the industry. And that is very true. So if you know Claire, you know that's true. Using her knowledge with over 16 years of direct claims experience, Claire has been a thought leader in workers' compensation. She created the first ever workers' recovery unit, co-hosted Adjusted, a claims podcast, co-founded The Transitions, and is a monthly contributor for workerscompensation.com, and as well as Just Begin magazine, which if you haven't checked it out, you have to check it out. So she's sharing her love for innovation in the workers' compensation space through those platforms. And by combining a solid technical foundation with her passion for creating a better experience through emotional intelligence, empathy, and customer centricity, Claire inspires others to ultimately make good things happen for people. Claire also believes in her duty goodness gracious. Claire also believes it is her duty and responsibility to add seats to any table she is invited to participate in. She is an ambassador for the Alliance of Workers' Compensation, board member for Kids Chance of Iowa, board member for the Claims and Litigation Management Alliance, Workers' Compensation Advisory Board, and the president-elect of the Insurance Association of Greater Des Moines. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Claire. Hi, Claire. How are you?
Hey, happy to be here. Lindsey and I are so pumped to be back for round 2 of emotional intelligence because we have so much amazing stuff to share with you. So we are going to start off with a quick recap if you were not able to make it here last time, and then we will head into today. So I'm going to go ahead and screen share, and hopefully this goes a little bit easier this time than it did last time. All right, so last time we covered who Lindsey and I were. Like, we're here because we want to help everybody. Really, it's not just in workers' compensation, but just how you lead overall. Because whether you are an adjuster that is leading injured workers or you are leading clients through challenging circumstances, we really want you to understand exactly the nature that makes humans work and how they thrive. So Lindsey and I are both pretty passionate about this. And where are we going? We are here in hopes that you can take a couple of tidbits away so that you can actually take this back to your teams and back to your daily practice of what you do to make good things happen for your teams as well. So what we covered last time, we talked about how humans are complicated. And I'm going to try and zip through this so we can get through our content. But we talked about how complicated human beings are. It is never a one size fits all. You know, especially going through the pandemic, we have a lot of emotions and a lot of things that were brought to the surface that we might not have ever realized before. So remember, human beings are multifaceted, multifunctional, multidimensional, and multi-emotional. And it really comes down to just seeking to understand where someone else is coming from and participate in active listening. We also talked about, are you managing in the system or are you working on the system? There's a very big difference. Like, are you actually managing the stuff or are you managing people? And that goes, again, that's with leading people and it's with when working in workers' compensation. Are you actually down there in the weeds working with somebody hand in hand, or are you helping coach people through? Because again, a lot of times we hate micromanagement. So look at the root cause of what you are doing and then how you are spending your time, if that is the most effective, and then work to communicate so you can figure out how you can make better, appropriate change to move things forward. Then talking about two of the most important leadership attributes is really understanding human behavior, starting with yourself. If you don't walk away from this with a deep dive into looking at yourself in the mirror, then I'm sorry, you've absolutely missed a lot of what Lindsey and I are talking about. But a lot of this starts with us. It starts with how we show up and how we communicate, what words we use, how we treat people, how you solicit feedback. Do you allow team members to coach up? Do you seek to understand things that you might not already have jumped to conclusions on? Looking at your own clarity, alignment, and purpose. Do they make sense with your organization and with what you have been communicating to your team or for your injured worker? If you're going to sit there and preach workers' recovery and advocacy and call them a claimant, guess what? That doesn't align. So we've got to really think about the language that we use and how we talk to each other, how we communicate, and what we do to seek to understand the other parties that we are working with. How do you keep a team warm? This is important. So whether it is a team around an injured worker, whether it is a legal team, whether it is the team that you are working with within an organization, we've really got to start checking in on each other and care. That is one of the most interesting things. I was on a board of directors call yesterday, and I was trying to figure out what motivates each of the people that serve on our board, because I do think that there are certain people in our industry that are not here for the right reasons. And I think that's what differentiates a lot of us, a lot of the people that are showing up here today to better ourselves. But I'm here to make good things happen for people because I believe that we can. I believe that every single person in the work comp industry can effectively drive meaningful, purposeful change, no matter what seat you sit in. But how does that start with? It starts with human connection. That starts with how are you? How are you doing? How often are we checking in on one another? And then for the heat map, as we look at this, really checking in on expectations. If you're running a team or even with an injured worker, what are your expectations for them? It is our expectation that we get you back to being a functional, contributing member of society. Then you've laid out an expectation. Now, how are we going to get there? And here's what I'm going to do for you. And here's what I need you to do for me. And we establish that accountability. And with that accountability comes letter A, appreciation, acknowledgement, and making sure you are holding people accountable. And then T, reminding everyone that we will get through this. And we talked about language. Language is so important. And so when you are actively listening in this emotional intelligence section, listen to the words that are coming to you. When you hear words that are past tense, they tend to be victim blaming, fighting, but it is somebody's reality. You've got to listen for this. And then present, you think of the tribe that you create. Sometimes it's divisive and it can showcase some us versus them. You have to listen for this when people are talking to you about what they're experiencing. When people talk about the future, it tends to be solution focused. It's a lot more opportunistic and it's a lot more optimistic. So when you have people that come to you with issues or problems and you are leading them, whether it be the injured worker, whether it be your clients, whether it be your team members, flip it to the future to seek to understand what is your role, that person that's coming to you, in making this better. So, I think one of the ones that I think everybody always hears is, I'm so busy. Well, what is your role in making you less busy? Are you busy or are you productive? And looking at that, starting to get people to look in the mirror for themselves. So I believe that is where we left off. So Lindsey, as we continue down communication, do you want to talk about how we effectively do this with team members?
And I think Claire just nailed a really good statement on the head. Is sometimes walking into any situation and first announcing how busy you are, it sets the tone for the rest of the meeting. I know in hearing those words, I'm so busy, can sometimes set my tone as the listener or the participant too, because then I feel like there's less focus on what's getting presented to me, right? Because at that point in time, I know that person delivering that message who tells me they're busy or they're so busy is already not going to make this a priority. And so if I'm the recipient, if I'm the participant, I've already lowered my expectations for what's going to be accomplished in the communication because I know the focus is misdirected. So I think that's so important to think about, especially in certain communications. If there's going to be difficult conversations, or it's going to be something that might be a little bit hard for the listener to hear or understand, that it's so important that these clarification words are used immediately, and that there's a lot of conversation that is found on emotion, and sometimes it's really important to focus the communication on what's important and what can be accomplished and what we can do together. And I love the first part of this about public praise versus private critique, because I do think that's so important in terms of communicating, especially with a group and individuals. And in our world of workers' compensation, I think there are many a times where, you know, there might be a group setting where certain situations are being discussed and what's the plan going forward, but how important it is on the back to make sure that any criticism or any thing that needs to be addressed on a critical nature is done privately, and clarifying that it's not meant to be something publicly announced. I know I appreciate that in my world, and when it's happened to me, is how you separate out that private criticism from your public praise. So I think communication is so important. And like Claire said, stating "I'm so busy" at the beginning of any conversation or meeting is always a tone, and how important it is to refocus.
I like the public, when we talk about public praise, privately critique. And if that ever happens where you do that, like for example, I can't stand the word claimant. If you ever have a conversation with me, I will probably correct you, because these are injured human beings, and it is literally like nails on a chalkboard for me to hear. But sometimes I have said it in front of people that I probably just needed to be quiet, and then take them aside afterwards and be like, hey, like, we don't talk like that. And it's like a swear word. I should start having like a swear jar, because these are injured human beings whose lives we're trying to make better. And so when you call somebody a claimant or you reference a claim number, no, I want the human being's name. And these are non-negotiables for me. They just are. And I think that when we look at the alignment and the clarity and the purpose, when you're trying to rally a team or a group, that all has to be in line. But I don't know, that was an easy one for me to say: publicly praise, privately critique. But it's like parenting too. Like, you know, you always want to be like, hey, that was a great job. And then afterwards, do not ever talk to mommy like that in public. That is not okay. You cannot sit on the stairs and pout. But it's something to think about though, because when I have seen people do it in a meeting setting or in a group setting, when we're all in, like when we're actually in a meeting room, I think it says way more about the leader than it does about the person who's being reprimanded. So something to think about for that as well. Sorry, Lindsay, back to you.
Oh, yes. I also think that it's so important to identify with yourself first. What are your non-negotiables? Claire just made a good point. Like, if it is something that is a non-negotiable, again, setting expectations when we're walking into any sort of dialogue or conversation is so important. And I think you first have to identify what are your non-negotiables, so that you don't leave yourself frustrated, confused, and not at the point where you feel like you accomplished what you set to accomplish. And so I think she's hit some on the heads. Like, if it is close for you, know that walking in, and know that you're going to change that dynamic as it's being discussed amongst a group, or even just with an individual, that you're going to continue to use injured worker versus claimant in your verbiage. And so it really sets a tone, I think, for everybody else. How many a times is it truly a situation where it is lost in translation because of something as simple as that, is that somebody doesn't like that you're saying the word claimant. And that is the only thing they can focus in on in listening to you. And so I think that those are important, aspects of communication, is making sure that you've identified non-negotiables. Once you've identified them with yourself, let's talk them out amongst your group that you're working with. Let's talk about what are the non-negotiables here, because at least at that point, you might prevent a hurdle from accomplishing anything more. And sometimes the non-negotiables are no big deal. And they're very easy to recognize, and everybody can agree on them. So I think that is one of the keys to effective communication, is what are the non-negotiables. I have walked into meetings multiple times, especially with multiple people communicating at once, and we have all been on different ideals about what our non-negotiables are. And guess what? We cross at every single intersection publicly, right? I mean, we publicly cross because we haven't identified to ourselves what our non-negotiables are. And so we've now, I think it's back to parenting. It's been the same situation. My husband and I are going to address the children, and we haven't discussed our non-negotiables. And so guess what? As parents, we failed because we have just put out two different issues in front of our children. Good luck getting them to understand what our goal is. So it's important to figure out what your non-negotiables are early on in the conversation, early on in your discussion points, and it will lead to effectiveness.
And I think one of the most powerful phrases that you can use during this time period where we're looking at these 4 elements of communication is, this is my opinion and my opinion alone. And I think that that's it, because then it sets the stage for it can be persuaded. I want to hear your side. This is just my opinion at this very moment based on the information that I have at hand. So then when you respond, you can say, well, I think, or I feel, and those really help, those clarifying statements of, hey, can you help me understand what you're coming from with this element? And it doesn't have to be adversarial or abrasive in any capacity. It's just looking for ways to open up communication on how things are going down. So with that, I saw Don Adams drew a smiley face. I think that's what that is on that screen. So thanks, Don. That's cute. Good artistic skills today. All right. Why do we ask questions during this? So this is one of those things. Questions are so powerful. And we know that from when we're doing investigations. We know that from like the legal realm. You go into depositions and you're going to be able to get all this information. This is really important. Why do we ask questions of one another? So number one, I think that demonstrating interest and care, like this is where when we're looking at what's your root cause, like one of the first questions that I love to ask people when I'm getting to know them, especially in this space, is why workers' compensation? And I'm always shocked when people don't say, because I'm here to help people, because I feel like this is one of those industries that your interest needs to come on that caring side, or I'm not 100% sure why you would have picked work comp. I mean, it's always interesting to me, but that's, again, my opinion and my opinion alone. But when you ask people questions, it means that you're taking an interest in finding out what's going on with them and hearing about what their perspective is or how their life is. Like when you ask, how are you? They say, fine. You say, no, how are you really? And you go back that second time to try and evoke some type of emotion so you can establish that connection. Then it also shifts the attention away from you. If you are not someone that likes the spotlight on you, asking questions of other people. I have a really good friend, Ryan McIntosh, director of Subro, probably one of the best people at this. We were at lunch with a group of people one day and they left and they're like, Ryan is just so awesome. I was like, he didn't share anything about himself. He's like, no, but I always ask questions of other people so that they feel seen, heard, and acknowledged. And that helps build that trust within that human connection piece. And I think that's fascinating because I had never actually watched it take place, but start watching the groups that you're a part of, especially on the weekends when you're with friends and family. Like take a notice into who asks questions and who doesn't, and then look at how much interest is invested on that caring element. And you'll start to see what we mean by how these relationships blossom and how human connection is established. Learning, it also helps the spurring of ideas and the exchange of ideas. The more questions that you ask. So Lindsey, help me understand why you believe X, Y, or Z. And then Lindsey could say, well, I feel blah, 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 based on blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. So help me understand element 2 of that. And you get to start exchanging ideas in an open and safe space. So by asking questions in this manner, it also provides this trust. Like if you've ever seen the Fockers, we're going to be in the circle of trust. And Greg is out here. But it's really trying to help establish that trust because you're investing now. Like I want to continue to ask you questions because I want to better understand where we're coming from. And I want you to feel that your answers are meaningful. And I want you to open up and tell me what you're talking about. So it's really helping that trust. And in the time of the questions being asked, then there's that mirror time too, where there's this reflection period of, oh, okay, or those aha moments can then come into play. And it also uncovers a lot on this. So when you're coming in to do any type of change management, so let's talk about it from an injured worker perspective. And you are asking questions like, Joe hasn't made it to his physical therapy appointments where he's not progressing like he should. And you start asking questions like, hey, Joe, have you been out for coffee with anyone lately? Have you gotten outside of your house? And you start to ask questions. Well, help me understand. Is it COVID that you're afraid of? Like, what's going on? Like, what is happening with you that we're not progressing anymore? So there's got to be a root cause to this. and we start asking the right questions, you will understand the desires that lie underneath and what willingness there is to change. So another example I could give you is if I'm asking someone like, why are you in workers' compensation? So let's just, for all joking sake, say Lindsay's in it for the money. Sorry, gotta laugh at that. Okay, so if I want Lindsay to start as my legal representation, I want her to stop using the word claimant and use the term injured worker while she's working with me and my team. How willingly do you think she's going to do that when I know that her root cause is that she is a money grubbing lawyer? Sorry, Lindsay, I just thought it was an easy one to go to. But when you look at things like that, like, it helps you understand people. And I look at it yesterday. So we're talking about Kids Chance at this board meeting yesterday and how we can get it so that it's effectively getting to adjusters, so adjusters can talk to the right people so we can have scholarships. Because guess what? Right now, we don't have enough kids for the scholarships, which is an awesome problem to have. But there's a bigger root cause. We need to figure out how to get to the adjusters so that they can start having these conversations. And I got met with resistance by some of the board members that were like, nah, it's too hard to talk to the adjusters. Really, I challenged that idea, and now we will find a way to make this happen. But it gave me an understanding of the desire between some of the people that were there, or where they sit positionally, like what kind of effect that has. And so when you ask questions like, well, help me understand, why do you think that that would be a hard thing to change, or how we could be more effective in making sure we get the better outreach? And you start listening to people, like, keep asking questions, because you will find out things about people that you probably already knew, but sometimes it's a really good way to dig a little bit deeper to figure it out. And Lindsay, you ask questions all the time for your job. So help me a little bit more on your side of this.
Yeah, I mean, we use a phrase a lot in our firm, and I don't know if I love it, but I think it gives me a visual. It's peeling back the onion. That if you just scratch the surface, it's really hard to get the information you possibly are looking for. And especially in our litigation world, it's really hard to walk into some situations with an injured worker, knowing that you're adverse and you're trying to get additional information that they're probably not really excited about providing at that stage of the process. And so how can you really truly reach a level where they're disclosing information that is necessary, in terms of providing an overall understanding of their claim and their complaints and their symptoms and what can be done to move it forward? Where is the resolution opportunity? And a lot of times I think, there's two ways to look at issues, difficult conversations. It's attacking that head on or going about it in a different way. A lot of times, in a deposition, especially I think about with an injured worker, is if, returning work is an issue in the workers' compensation claim. You really can't just hit that on the head. You have to find a way to come about it, talking about maybe past employment. Hey, tell me about these past jobs. What did you do? Do you think you can go back to that job? Why not? Why not? And a lot of times asking just simple questions like, why not? Might start a conversation of explaining the situation, and it might even offer the person responding an opportunity to clarify their own position on why not. And so I think, help me understand why not. Those are great phrases to, again, peel back the onion and not just stop at the surface level. Can you do you think you could return to this job? No. And then moving on is, you really haven't got much out of that conversation, but well, why not? And getting that conversation rolling too. I think this works in so many situations too, by people start talking and how important it is to listen and continue the dialogue of what they're discussing, right? If they've brought up their dog, if they've brought up a vacation, if they've brought up, a situation that's specific to them, to listen and continue to peel back the onion on that topic. And you'll probably be surprised as to what you find out. And then remembering, I think too, remembering that conversation is so important. Because I think it shows that you as the listener are, again, willing to listen and absorb what they're talking about and really develop that trust that Claire said. I think it's so important that when you see them the next time, or you have that conversation with them in the future, that you bring up a topic that they have told in the past, and how much of a connection that is on a personal level with anybody is so so important in effective communication.
And using, like, even looking at it from like an adjusting side, use your activities. Like, okay, if you've talked to, like, I see Katie Hensley's on here, so shout out to Katie. Hello, I love to help me understand as well. So I know Katie has a son. So if I am working with her on a claim, then I could put in my activity. So it's not going in the claim file notes, but like ask about Katie's son, or set yourself an Outlook reminder. There are so many technology tools that if you don't think you can keep that in your repository, find ways to make yourself more effective and efficient, because it will establish more meaning when the next time you go back to have that conversation with somebody about knowing some little sliver and continuing to weave that through the conversations that you have. We're always making sure that you ask. Like, I remember when I had come to my most recent position, I remembered one of the leaders, and I knew she had 3 children, and I knew one of them was graduating from Iowa State, and it was just something that I continued to ask about. It was just something that stuck with me. So find things that you can use as human connection elements, because those are going to be the important factors that keep people interested in wanting to talk to you to begin with. So as we continue to move on, we want to talk about looking at that mirror. So in the last slide, it talked about, it gives you a time for reflection. And this is one of those amazing times where I'm going to ask you guys all to turn inside for a little bit. So how do you start to transform your lives? Let's say you want to be more emotionally intelligent as a leader, or let's say you want to lose weight, because COVID-19 really meant COVID-19 pounds if you live in my house, even the dog. So that's been fun. But it is literally, you start to transform your life choice by choice. So every choice, like I chose to drink coffee over water. You make thousands of choices every single day. So do I want bacon or do I want vegetables? Most of the time it's both, but you know, you can figure out what you want from that. But we've got to start thinking about things in much smaller increments than, all right, I'm just gonna use weight loss because it's an easy one. Oh my gosh, I need to lose 19 pounds or whatever it might be. Break it down by choices. And that also goes into even your communication as like a leader. Think about the next time that you talk to somebody that's on your team. I think hierarchy is really, it's very bizarre to me, because at the same time, we're all on the same team. Like, we're on the same team to help make good things happen for injured workers in the work comp space, or we're all on the same team of an organization to drive a business operating unit forward. So when it comes to like how to talk to somebody, you get to make that choice when you say hello. Every time you pick up the phone to talk to an injured worker, your choices start at that hello. What tone are you going to use? Are you going to smile? What is going to be your next question? Are you going to multitask, or are you going to really listen to this human being that's on the other side? Every single moment you are given so many choices. Like right now, are you multitasking? Or are you listening to Lindsey and I? Are you writing notes or are you not? And I'm kidding, because I'm sure everyone has to do their thing. But then you start to empower yourself through your choices. And it starts this snowball effect of, oh my gosh, I've got it together. Okay, then I'm going to make the next good choice, and the next good choice, and the next good choice. And it stems through all aspects of your life, whether we're looking at leadership, whether we're looking at working with injured workers, whether we're looking at self-improvement. Every single moment gives you a choice and opportunity. And so when you start empowering yourself with one step, and then the next step, and then the next step, you will start to be able to carve out this new space for your life improvements, or how effective you are in your job, how effective you are at communicating, how effective you are at actually changing whatever it is that you want to change. And when you start to do this, there's always going to be more than one right answer. So if something doesn't work and you start going down that choice path and it doesn't work, then you know what? Switch it up. There's always more than one right answer. And I think that that's one to continue to reiterate here, as there's not one path to get an injured worker whole. There's not one path to lead a team to excellence. There is not one path to lead an injured worker into a recovery phase where they are back to being a functional contributing member of society. The key is to focus on creativity. And you know what? One of the best phrases I have ever heard happened to be from a gentleman that works at Berkeley North Pacific. His name is Zach Dalton. And he swears by this, that you could be right. So whenever he and his wife talk, he's always like, okay, you could be right. But the thing is, you really could. So I challenge you guys to start approaching everyone like this when they come to you with ideas, when you're starting to talk to people. Help me understand, okay, you could be right, really could. So let's start looking at things like this. I think it was made as a snide comment towards his wife, but it made me laugh, because it's like, that's actually pretty innovative. Because if we started approaching people with, you could be right, let's start looking at things from their lens or their perspective. Lindsey, anything you want to add on choices?
I don't know about all of you, but after the Super Bowl, I think I was one of how many thousands of people that Googled like Tom Brady diet and like what he does. And I think like all of the thousands of people who did that also went, well, I can't do that. I mean, I can't do everything that he does, but I'm going to find one thing. And for me, it was, I'm just going to drink more water. Cause I was like, I can't cut out that stuff of my diet. And I surely can't do, you know, his, yes, water. And you know, that was the one thing I decided that I would add to my life so that I would not age like Tom Brady has not aged. And so I think that is for me another reflection of like choices. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to cut out all sugar and bread and, you know, work out hours a day or whatever his, you know, whatever his routine was, but I am going to find one thing that I could add to my world that would be a good choice going forward. And so I think that's exactly how we have to look at certain situations, especially with injured workers, is it seems like they probably feel like they're facing Tom Brady's diet and workout regimen after an injury when it comes to the amount of appointments and recovery timeline and, you know, getting back to work. And maybe it's just one thing. Hey, did you make it to therapy this week? How did that go? That one piece of the puzzle is a one step, and not making it, when can we get you back to work? When are you going to be full duty? When are you going to not have any, more restrictions? So I think this is a great way to look at choices. I know I do it in the simplest terms. People call them brain dumps. You know, hey, when you're feeling overwhelmed, that you write everything down instead of continually to keep it in your brain and, you know, constantly mulling over it, thinking, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to accomplish everything that I have going on. But writing it down, dump it out, and starting with one. And so I think this is a great way to transform, is to start with one choice and not them all.
Yes. So then it is when we're looking at working with a team. So we've talked about choices. All right. So as we are navigating choices, so the team can be the injured worker team. It can be your team that you are a part of organizationally, whatever that looks like. Where are we going? So if you're an injured worker, what's our goal? So you want to look at where the bus is going. So we look at it in 3 different components. There is a floodlight. So the next 90 to 100 days. So let's say for all intended purposes, we have an injury where we can get that injured worker back to life in the next 90 to 180 days. Let's focus on that. So looking at the floodlight. Then let's pinpoint it a little bit more. Let's spotlight it. What's our goal in the next 60 days? So maybe that's like returning into some work capacity, into some type of modified duty. Again, don't ever use the word light duty. There's another one that, modified duty. And then laser. What's our goal for this week? And I think that can work with any team that you're a part of, right? So where are we going? How are we going to get there? You've got floodlight, spotlight, and laser. So then you just break it down, because again, like Lindsey said, when you look at the whole Tom Brady diet, it's like, holy cow. Okay, well, where do I want to go? All right, so I want to be healthier. What is my floodlight zone? So let's say it's to lose the COVID-19 or whatever, COVID-23 or whatever we've got going on. All right, so then my spotlight. So my next 60 days, let's try and lose 5 or 10 pounds, or I'm going to try and start walking or try a different exercise regimen. And then what am I going to do this week or today? So I'm going to go to the gym 3 times this week. So that's how you break the goals down. And it's also how you can do a shared vision, and it still keeps you in that alignment and purpose realm, because you've showed the destination that you want to go to, and then you've made it the floodlight, the spotlight, and then the laser focus for the time periods. And then what's expected? What do you expect during this time period? Like, I think it's also, you've got to be realistic with where the adversity is that you're going to be met with, because there are always going to be challenges that are going to creep up. You're always going to, if we're going to stay with the workout mentality, things are going to come up, and then it's going to be 7 p.m. and it's like, oh, all right, well, now I can't get to the gym tonight because I've got X, Y, and Z on my plate, but could you at least go for a walk? Can you get 30 minutes in? And trying to find other things that can keep you in that alignment that you need to keep your progress moving forward. And then look at the value. What is the value of where you're going and where people are going? This is the big thing of keeping everyone in alignment and keeping that bus moving forward. Linz, anything you want to add on that?
No, I think that's, yeah, I just think that's great. I really like that floodlight, spotlight, and laser, because it just gives it, again, I'm a visual person. I like the onion getting peeled. I like the
Yes. Yeah.
floodlight example. I think those are great. So, and I think it really helps personally and in management and leadership positions too. So I think that's a great analogy. Love it.
So then we got to build some trust and transparency. We know where we're going. Now we're trying to build that trust. And this is where we've got these points up here, like asking questions for people to open up. This is one of those times where I believe that the workers' compensation space failed by not building on the pillars of transparency, authenticity, and vulnerability. I want to focus on vulnerability for this, because this is where you create psychologically safe environments. You can use such little slivers of your life and not opening up to being like, hey, injured worker, let's be Facebook friends and let's be best friends for life. But you can open up and bring teams together, or bring camaraderie with an injured worker, or in working with that injured worker team, whether it's also bringing in the nurse case management, the employer, whatever that looks like. Start with like an embarrassing childhood moment. Gosh, we all have them. Like my daughter is in middle school right now. So yeah, I remember how awful middle school is, and I had braces and I tried to cut my own bangs, which meant like they were like right here. It was terrible. So, but we all have like some of those embarrassing childhood moments that at this point I'm unbelievably comfortable with. So let's talk about them. Or maybe a positive family vacation moment. We all have these little slivers that can help us appear to be vulnerable in a way that helps us connect to other people. It helps get you to understand. One of the other tools I really like is tell me 3 good things since the last time we've talked. I guarantee you, if you're in the adjusting space, or you're in the nurse case management space, and you start using that, you will learn so much about other people. You'll understand what they value, how they spend their time, what's important to them, what is going to be those value drivers for what's going to make them want to move forward and get back into their life engagement. From a team member standpoint, you start figuring out how your team spends their time, so you learn their values of what they honor in their life, and it's going to help you connect with them better because you understand what is important from their seat. And to drive effective change and to be emotionally intelligent, it means nothing about what you're doing and all about the people that you are with. Now, also take a deep dive in yourself. A lot of this stuff does also start from yourself. Notice, ask questions, think about this internally, and you've got to make people feel like you like them. That's the other thing. Like, I think there is this old school way, and I'm going to call it old school. I'm going to call it the old school way of leadership, that it's like, we have to be careful around people. No, as a leader, it is your job to serve your people. So there should be a liking of sorts. There is, yes, I understand that respect's important, but I also feel like positional power is earned and not guaranteed by a title. So yeah, it is important that people like you or feel like you like them. That is a big deal because you are investing so much time with these people. And so when you think about it from like an injured worker standpoint, I don't want to work with an adjuster that I don't like. Like, I don't want to have to sit here and call you and know that this phone call is going to be adversarial and awful in nature. Like, just take the time to learn about people so that you can like each other, so that when I have to call Lindsey to give her, hey, I just left the doctor and this is my patient status update, that it's a meaningful and not an awful experience. Because remember, like I said during our first session, when you have an experience with a human being, it is either going to move your needle forward or it is going to deplete you. There is no in between. People are either going to leave you better off than they found you, or they are going to leave worse. And I know I want people to leave every time that I interact with them better. I don't want people to leave depleted. Like, it happens, and you can feel your energy change when you're around these people. But that's for a tribe conversation at a different time. Then you try and like relate to people. Relate. Lynn, go ahead.
And I know that it's weird in the sense of with an injured worker to use social, media and social networking with an injured worker, but outside of that potential weirdness, how great of a cheat is social media or social networking and communicating and getting to know somebody? Because if you have that connection with that person on social media, you probably have an opportunity before you walk into a conversation with them to look at their social media real quick and see if there's anything that's happened recently in their life, and use that as a cheat to immediately take it down to a personal level. And so while it might not apply that you want to be Facebook friends with an injured worker, it could happen in your own world, in your own teams, in your own personal interactions with colleagues, and that if you are friends with them, you might be able to gain some information. My husband yesterday, it was a prime example. He came upstairs and he said, oh, I asked so-and-so to go to lunch. And he said, he kind of gave a weird response that he might not be able to. And I said, well, have you checked Facebook today? I mean, have you got online? Because his friend was very publicly dealing with this situation, and it was all over. It wasn't bad, it wasn't dramatic, but it was just, I was like, this is so funny that you haven't got on social media to see that he's dealing with a lot right now. He might not be able to grab lunch with you tomorrow. And so I think that's a prime example of like, my husband was taking it as, oh, do you think something's wrong? I mean, he just was so weird in his response. And I said, no, I look at social media. He's got a lot on his plate right now. So how simple of a cheat I think social media can provide sometimes to know what somebody else is dealing with before you walk in to a certain situation, and can provide you just that little personal knowledge that might help in the communication.
It's huge difference. Plus, then it helps you with intentional relationships. So we've got to be intentional with our time. Like if you're not going to give somebody your undivided attention, and I know that I'm guilty of this, and I know Lindsay's guilty of this, we have these moments where you try to multitask. When we're working with human beings, we need to be intentional with our time and intentional with the space that we are going to provide, because this will, I love this. And people are like, well, I'm so busy. You're going to be 10 times more busy if you do not spend the time to establish a connection with that person at that time. Because if they don't feel seen, heard, and acknowledged, guess what? They'll run, and then we have to call Lindsay, and we need to get attorneys involved and whatnot, because they just need somebody who wants to listen to them. And that can be on your team. It can be with the injured workers. I mean, think about it. One of the best questions that I've ever been asked, and I always thought this was funny, and I want audience, come off your mute, and I want you to answer this. When is the best time to tell your partner that you love them? It's supposed to be like they asked wife, but I mean, I want partner for this one because
as often as you can.
Okay, Brandon says as often as you can. I think that's a good one. Anyone
Not
else?
on the way out the door.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
Every day. Always.
Every day. Oh. So the answer that they gave us was before someone else does. And I think that's so powerful as a leader, because when we talk about being seen, heard, and acknowledged, how many times do people do great work for you and they are your rock stars? And we know that they're going to be the rock stars. So we don't necessarily pay as much attention to them because they're doing such an awesome job. They need the acknowledgement as well. And so I think that that's really powerful when we think about when is the best time to tell somebody you love them before someone else does. I think, and I love it. I love it when we come from like a job standpoint too, when people are considering leaving jobs. Well, why would they consider leaving? Did you tell them that they were a valued member of your team ever? How did the organization respond? And I think like when we're looking at, one of the things that I've loved about talking to students lately is like, if you do not feel valued by your company, don't stay, because there are so many other organizations that want you there and that want you to be a part of their team, and they will make you feel seen, valued, and acknowledged. So when we talk about being intentional, this is very important and one of the most important elements in all of relationships. So when we look at this, and especially when we're looking at it from like a team standpoint, making sure that there are shared ground rules for engagement and that you've got accountability partners, like find some people to hold you accountable. If you are going to be working towards goals, trying to be better at being more emotionally intelligent, you're going to try and start that workout routine, whatever, find somebody that can hold you accountable. And this is one of the things that I wish we trained adjusters better on in the work comp space. Injured workers need to be held accountable too, because we do succeed better. And if you think about this from your own goal standpoint, whatever your goal is, whatever your choices are, you will do better statistically by being held accountable with someone else. That's what the adjuster is. You're basically a coach. You're a coach and you're a leader of this human being. So we've got to establish ground rules and we have to hold each other accountable and making sure that everything is in alignment. Alignment is super important. And one of the other things that I want to touch on with this slide is names. The most important sound someone can hear is the sound of their own name. And it's what is statistically, if you can say someone's name 7 times during a conversation, you are more likely to remember them. So the magic number is 7. But if you think about it, when you're saying goodbye to people on the phone, you say goodbye, Lindsay, or goodbye, Brandon. Like, I think that that's Like, I'm always like, oh, I love it. They just said my name. Because one of the sweetest sounds that we resonate with is when people say our name and acknowledge, because you're being seen, heard, and acknowledged. So this all kind of ties together and wraps around. And when you're not aligned in these steps, as we've talked about throughout these slides, tension is what happens when there is an absence of conflict. And so we've got to clear the air. So being intentional with making sure that we do seek out if we have something that's gone on that we don't understand, or there are other questions that we need to ask, make sure that we keep this communication open, because the more communication that we keep open, the less tension and the less conflict that arises, because we're taking the time to really understand where that other person is coming from. And a lot of times, as we've been looking at the diversity, equity, and inclusion space, this has become, I hate that we say it's like on the rise, because it should have always been there, but it is looking at things from a different lens. It is coming up with things and understanding that what could be potentially conflicting and why that matters when we're looking at alignment, and we're making sure that people feel seen, heard, and acknowledged, and bringing your whole self to work and establishing trusting, transparent relationships that are in a psychologically safe space. All of this comes together and ties into emotional intelligence in being a part of the really just basic human connection. Lindsey, anything else you want to add to this slide? And I'll keep rolling.
No, and I think too, I think a lot of times we think because an employee possibly hasn't had any negative situation, that means they feel that they have the support of the company, because they haven't had any negative feedback, or because they haven't had to have any negative interaction, that they feel that they've had positive interaction with the company, and how lost that can get in translation. That how important it is to affirm the good things they've done, even if you do have other situations where you're having to provide criticism, how important it is to make sure you're giving the positives too. And I think that's hard sometimes in organizations or situations to continually provide positive feedback when you feel like all you might be doing is doling out criticisms or negative information. So I just think that's a really important tip too.
And as we roll into this slide, here's your statistics behind this. So first of all, the leaders that are considered most talented are excellent communicators. So something to think about, like if you really want to go into leadership or enhance your leadership skills, start by communication and figuring out what that communication looks like for you and your team. So 85% of employees are disengaged, 85%, and that is Gallup's meta-analysis of data as of 2018. So add in the pandemic, and I'm sure we might be a little higher. Companies with engaged employees are 21% more profitable, also from Gallup's meta-analysis of data. And like Lindsey just said, the absence of negative feedback is not positive feedback. Like you've got to actually tell people when they're doing a good job. And 64% of employees received zero appreciation within the past 12 months. And we wonder why we have this type of, like, this is what stews within organizations. And so that's where we ask, when's the best time to tell your employee you appreciate them? Before someone else does. So as we move on, so to be a sorry, my dog is gonna stop. You can't give away what you don't have. So how do you start showing up every day as a level 10 life? So if you're going to show up as your best self, as the adjuster working with injured workers, as a leader focusing on a team, again, you can't give away what you don't have. So when we start looking at self-care, and I think Katie put in there that she was looking at really focusing on mental health awareness so that she can be a better leader for her team. Those elements matter. We have a limited amount of decision-making power that goes into our daily lives. And so we've got to start thinking outside of what we normally do and start really focusing on the things that are going to matter. So if you want to put the ideas behind the power of habit and whatnot, getting yourself into a routine of some kind to make sure that you feel full by the time that you're going to get ready to pour into other people. Because if Lindsey is on my team and I wake up in the morning and I check my phone and I look at my email and I'm like, oh, here comes the day. And I'm coming to work at a 4, how on earth am I supposed to empower my team and inspire my team to do good, awesome things when I'm showing up as a 4? So we've got to do things that make us feel good about ourselves to show up, whether that's putting on a fun playlist. And I know Mari posts about having really quality tea, because I was reading that this morning. And there's different elements that we can bring into our lives to make us feel awesome at that level 10 life. So what does that look like for you? And that is really looking at consistent habits and what inspires you and what you can do to set appropriate boundaries to show up as your best self. So do you really need to check your email before 8 a.m. or whatever time it is that you are logging on, or you're going to make yourself available for people? And if you take that extra 10 minutes to make sure that you're good to go for the day, I guarantee your teams will thank you. It's just really taking that time. So I want to ask you guys to think about this. What do you need to focus on your life at a level 10? If you needed to wake up every day feeling super recharged and revived, what 3 things could you take away from this? So I know Lindsey talked about water and working out for being Tom Brady, because that's her goal in life. I would add in meditation. So there's 3 for us. We've got meditation, water, and working out. That would help me live my best life. I'd throw out like listening to a really jazzy song too, because I like to dance. But I want you guys to think about that, because you got to think about what's also going to deplete you. If I check my email first thing in the morning, and then I'm like, ugh, all right, so guess what? I'm not going to check my email before I come into work. And I guarantee if you guys try to do that for a couple of days, it is so awesome. It really is. But we get these connective things. So I know we need to wrap up. We've got like 2 minutes left. And I wanted to give you guys, Lindsey and I both wanted to give you guys some other resources that if you want to keep moving with this, like if you want to really continue to focus on yourself and what's going to drive yourself forward, to be using emotional intelligence by focusing on what helps you come to the table as your full self, so you can pour into other people. Atomic Habits is a great one. So again, remember we are limited to a specific decision-making power per day. It's why Steve Jobs always wore the black turtleneck and jeans and white tennis shoes. No joke, it's a serious thing. That's why he did that. He wanted to focus his brain power on things that mattered and elements that mattered. So look at it from this. So Atomic Habits by James Clear. He talks about living a high performance life where he doesn't really think about the first 3 hours of his day. He doesn't think about it. It's a routine. He gets up, he drinks water, he meditates, he gets to the gym, he has the breakfast, and it's a routine so that he doesn't have to think or decide, do I get up today? Do I not get up today? It is just a routine that he flows into so that by the time you get to work, you've got that decision-making power for whatever it's going to be to inspire you for your day. The Miracle Morning talks about the 5 things you should do every morning that can change your life. And the 5 a.m. Club talks about all the importance of why you should get visible. Lindsey, last minute, rounding it out to you, and we are done within an hour.
Just wanted to point out that I, during COVID, cut my bangs and put braces back on. So I do have to say that I have empathy towards all stories right now, current and in 7th grade. So just if anybody needed that today, you're welcome. I took care of it for you.
Sorry, I didn't think about that when I said those 2 things. So again, when you put your foot in your mouth, acknowledge it. I'm sorry. My bangs were like this long though. I mean, they were like I got my hair rolled up in a brush and had to cut it. So, and we're not as cute as yours. But with that, I hope you guys can find 3 things to take away that you can start doing to showing up as your full life at a level 10 self, and 1 reflection point.